And welcome back to TL Talks Podcast. I am TL. It's good to have you. Like and subscribe. Appreciate it in advance. First segment is called The Thought of the Day. The thought of the day for this month, which is June of 2023, has to do with when you deal with people, you're not just dealing with that person. So if you're going through life and you're having interactions with people, positive or negative, or however your day goes, and you have an interaction with somebody and it doesn't it's definitely not positive. It goes negative for some reason, right? Whether they're very abrasive, they're very aggressive, um, violent. I mean, there's a lot of different ways it can go. If it's a negative interaction with that person, I think it's important to consider that you're not just dealing with that person. Um, you're dealing with a whole bunch of things you can't see. You're dealing with whatever's going on in their life at the time. You're dealing with their past, their upbringing, traumatic events from their childhood, possibly, or more recently. But the important thing to drive home is just that it's not as simple as just the person in front of you. They're not just simply an asshole. Um, they're probably an asshole because they've had some really shitty things happen to them, and this is their defense mechanism for how to react to the world based on their experiences. So I'm not giving it a pass to everybody who acts like an asshole, because we should be accountable for our actions, and that's actually another segment in this episode. But I think it's just important to look at the whole picture, and that's hard to do it in the moment. But I think it's an important message just to consider that you're not just dealing with the person you see in front of you. You're dealing with a whole bunch of things you can't see, and so try to have empathy if you can. Try to have empathy to what they could be going through, what they could have went through in their past, because all that stuff matters, and it all contributes to what you're experiencing right now. So that's my thought of the day. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Next segment is called "If I Were President." I will never be the president of the United States because I have no interest in that. But if I was, um, I have a segment where I just talk about things that I would do differently than what's being done currently. This month is about scammers. So I don't know. Hopefully, you don't have the same experience as me, but in my experience, I deal with scammers almost on a daily basis. Whether it's a random text message asking for somebody who isn't me, or um, a friend request on social media. I mean, there's always different. I mean, some kind of spam message on Instagram. Like it's just constant, this constant barrage of these fake profiles that are trying to scam me in some way. Um, Usually it's about money. Usually they're trying to get your money in one way or another. And so they're making fake profiles, trying to be somebody else, trying to coerce you. Um, that's the world we live in. So, what I would do if I were president is I would crack down on scammers. Oh, buddy, very hard. So, if these scammers in other countries want to, this is what they want to do with their lives to try to manipulate people and scam them out of their hard-earned money. I would crack down on them so hard that it would just send waves through the whole scamming community, about just be careful if you want to do it to Americans because they're actually going to hold you accountable. Right now, I don't think they're being held accountable. That's my perception of the current reality. That's very frustrating for me to be inundated by scam type stuff almost daily and feel like nobody's tracking it, nobody cares. It's just a part of something like I'm supposed to just deal with or accept as a part of my current day to day life in America. Just don't think it's acceptable. And I don't know why nobody cares, but if I was president, I would definitely care. I know how it feels. And so I would just make it a point to try to hold these people accountable, and crack down on them in a way that would definitely deter their behavior. And so that's what I would do if I was president. Next segment is called TLRantz. TLRantz kind of has to do with the first thought of the day, but it talks about um, what I wanted to talk about is ownership. So things go, things go good in life, bad in life. Things don't work out the way you wanted them to. Specifically, I'm a football coach, so I coach a women's team and a men's team. Um, when things aren't going well or you lose a game, I think it's unfortunately a very natural reaction to point fingers and to blame and make excuses for why you lost. And this this can be used outside of football. It can be just used in life, right? If you have something not go your way in life, whether it's you didn't get a promotion or um, whatever, just something you wanted and you didn't get. I think a better way to look at it instead of making excuses is to take ownership. And so I'm a big fan of ownership, and I think it can change your life, honestly. I know that sounds dramatic, but if you just, if your first response to negative things is ownership, which I try to make that mine, it's a game changer. It really, if you start with ownership and you skip like going straight to the finger pointing and blaming and making excuses, it literally can change everything. It's just much more grounded way to live your life, and I highly recommend it. And so that's my TLRantz. There's just a lot of people that make excuses and point fingers, and it's I didn't always know this. I mean, I was guilty of that myself in the past, so I wasn't always as wise as I am today. But um, at this age and this part of my life, it's very obvious to me that ownership is a better route to take, and it's more productive. Just it allows you to learn instead of just shift the blame somewhere else. And at this stage of my life, I'm all about learning and becoming a better person every day. So that's my TL rant segment. Last but not least, before we get into the interview, is my update for the football teams that I coach. If you know me, you know that I coach a women's tackle football team called the Denver Bandits, who compete in the WNFC, and I also coach a local semi-pro men's team called the Vipers. Um, that are their coach is Justin DePuch, who's a good friend of mine, and it's an honor to coach with him. So the updates would be with the Bandits. I'm trying to think. I think we didn't have a podcast last month because my podcast guest flaked out on me. Go Humans. Um, so I think the last time I talked to you, we were at the beginning of our season. So let me just give you the whole virtual tour of our season, so they didn't miss anything, and then we'll move on to the Vipers. So Denver Bandits, 2023. Um, First game of the season. I think I told you this last time. We went to Houston to play a new team called the Houston Mambas. Lost that game 10-0. So Houston's a good team, a good, especially for being a new team, a very talented and well coached team. So it wasn't a crazy surprise that we lost, but because we're a good team and we were a playoff team and we have, obviously we've been around longer than a brand new team. We were definitely the favorites for that game, but we lost 10-0. I think we had two first downs on offense, which is very humbling. Um, and so once again, taking ownership is they were the better team. They played better. They were coached better. They won the game fair and square. Um, and I own that. We should own that. And so that's how our season started. So we're 0-1. Then we played Seattle at home. We won that game 12-0. Seattle was missing some players. Their best running back didn't make the trip. And unfortunately, their defensive captain, April Arnold, had a really bad injury and she was out for the season. So felt horrible about that. So we lost 10-0 to Houston, then beat Seattle 12-0. So now we're 1-1. Then we go to Kansas City. Kansas City was an interesting matchup because they have several of our former players. Um, they had recruited a lot of new players in the offseason. They used the transfer portal very well. Probably the team that had the most transfer portal players join a new team. I think they were the number one team that had transfer portal players choose Kansas City. So they have a good roster, good coaching. Their results were pretty good so far, except when they played Texas, which is usually the case for everybody. Um, And so it looked like it was going to be a good matchup. I mean, we kind of had similar results. We had lost to Houston, but beat Seattle. Obviously, haven't played Mississippi and Texas yet, and so kind of tough to say. But we kind of looked like we were in the same ballpark as Kansas City. The game's in Kansas City, so we go to the game. Unfortunately, our offense coordinator Rashad Ray did not make the trip. So we didn't have our offense coordinator calling the plays. We had two other coaches sharing the play calling, and the game was defensive battle. Um, Depending on how you look at it, it was either the greatest game ever or the worst game ever. So the game ended 0-0, um, and it went in overtime. The overtime rules, which I didn't know this until it happened, but the overtime rules are you get you get the ball at like the 20-25 yard line twice. Like each team gets the ball at 25. If neither team scores, then on third overtime, each team gets the ball at the 2 yard line, and then it just whoever can score and get a stop wins. So long story short, we end up winning in three overtimes. When they give us the ball on the 2 yard line, we do a power run to the left with Grace Cooper. He gets in, and we finally won this marathon of a game. So we won that game 2-0, which is a crazy. It's like a baseball score. 2-0 in triple overtime over the Kansas City Glory, which I mean it's an ugly win, but I was super proud of how we played because for the game to be that long, a lot of teams wouldn't have been able to like stay with it and keep fighting and pull out the victory. So I was proud of that. And so we win that game. Now we're 2-1. Now the hardest part of our schedule is coming up. We literally played the number one, number two, and number three teams in the WNFC to finish our season. Lucky us, right? So next game is at home versus Mississippi Panthers. Mississippi Panthers are the second best team in the league, in my opinion. That's what I've been saying for a while. Um, but we had just come off a marathon win against Kansas City. We had won two in a row. We knew that they were very good, but we also aren't bad. And so we're like, okay, let's see what we can do. That was a hell of a game. The final score was, I believe, 28-19. Um, Mississippi won, and it was I don't want to call it a moral victory. Like we had struggled to score points, right? Versus Houston, we scored zero. Versus Seattle, we scored 12, and versus Kansas City, we scored two in three overtimes. So we've essentially scored 14 points in three games. So we've just had a hard time scoring on offense. So for us to score 19 against Mississippi was good to see. Obviously, we wanted to win the game, so not ideal, like not best case scenario. But we had a better game offensively. We scored more points. Alyssa McGinnis, number 88 for us, had a really good game, and so it was exciting. I mean, both teams scored. It was hard fought. There was a little bit of I don't know. I guess a little bit of controversy. Like our right tackle got hurt. Unfortunately, she's out for the season. Or yeah, she was out for the season. Season's over now. Her name's Morgan Darden. She got hurt in I think her knee. Actually, the same thing as last year. So she's out for the season, right? Well, um, I don't know. I love Mississippi, so I'm not talking smack about them at all. But like some of their players were like talking, but they were talking while our player was injured, so it made it look bad. And I've talked to Mississippi since then, and they've clarified that that wasn't connected, and they definitely wouldn't do that intentionally. I was told that there's some Denver players that didn't shake hands after the game, which is a little bit disappointing. Like it doesn't matter how you feel, you should be a good sport and just shake hands and be an adult about it. But that's what happened. So we move on. Now we're 2-2. Our next game's against Texas, the team that never loses. They've never lost in 4 years, so must be nice. We're playing Texas at home also. So that game goes. The final score was 34 to 6. Yeah, I believe 34 to 6. Um, I was proud of us containing their run game. In my estimation, we're the only team that's really stopped their run game all season. And a big part of that was Amber Kraft being in the middle. She's not only one of the best linebackers in the nation, but she also has great range. So when you're trying to tackle somebody like Tara Thomas, you have to have range. She's just fast and quick. And so we did a good job of containing the run game. Our defensive game plan for that game was to play cover four so they don't beat us over top, which makes sense. But because they were coached well, they just threw bubble screens because we were backing up for cover four. So they threw bubble screens all game, ran the ball, not with a ton of success, but some success. So the combination of their bubble screens and smoke screens and them running the ball and broken tackles, missing tackles, resulted in a final score of 34 to 6. One thing I will say about that score is there was about 5 minutes left in the game, and the score was 27 to 6. Yep, 27 to 6. And I was thinking to myself, I was thinking, you know what? If this is the final score, I'm okay with that because the least points they had been held to this year was against Houston. Houston lost 28 to 0. So it's like if we give up 27, we give up the least points. And then obviously scoring on them, we had 6 points is always a good thing. So I was like, 27 to 6 isn't great, but it's kind of a moral victory because you give it the least points and you scored and you go from there. Well, um, from my perspective, it is a goal of Texas to beat teams by at least 4 scores. My evidence of that is with 5 minutes left, up 21 points in Denver. Game is essentially over. Instead of them playing their backups and running the ball, running the clock out, they kept their starters in, threw the ball almost every play so they could score one more time to make it a 4 score game. So that kind of rubs me the wrong way. The flip side of that is, well, if you should be able to stop it. So like it's not their fault that you can't stop what they're doing. So you like I see both sides. I see the side where I'm coming from, where it's like, why are you trying to score again if you have the game in hand and then the game's over? Um, but also I see their side or other people's side of, if you can't stop it, then why should we, not keep scoring? So I see both sides, and I don't know, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way because, um, I hear Texas players taunting the fans on the sideline, and um, I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me, and so it is what it is. I mean, Texas is very good. Uh, they have a lot of good players. They're coached well, and they beat us 34 to 6, and so it is what it is. You have to live and learn and move on. Last game of the season is in Utah. So Utah is ranked number 2. So we went well, I don't know, maybe number 3. I think it went Mississippi number 2, Texas number 1, Utah number 3. That's how we finished our season. So we're playing in Utah, and I think that final score was something like 29 to 40, high scoring game. Um, so we lost all 3 of those games. So we finished the season losing a shootout with Utah, and so now our record is 2-4, which isn't great. Um, but that game against Utah, I was proud of it because we battled. Like the last play of the game was a catch by Griggs at the 4 yard line. Like we battled literally to the last whistle, and I was proud of that. So I felt like that us battling Utah like that should say something about our team and um, that we were basically playoff worthy or at least part of the conversation. That's how our season ended. Well, the the drama was Las Vegas finished 3-3. We finished 2-4. So if you go by records, obviously Vegas is in, if you go by power rankings or strength of schedule, we're easily in. And so there's like all this drama about who's going to get in, and we got in, which has been the that's been the like history has shown in the WNFC. That's the way it goes. When it comes to two teams, somebody has a better record. The team that looks better on paper or is in the power rankings or had a stronger schedule, they get in the playoffs. And in that case, that was us this year. So we get in over Las Vegas, and we're going to the West, which is back to Utah, which that's where we just were. Back to Utah for the playoffs, and we go against Texas. Because Texas is the one seed, Utah and San Diego are 2 and 3 seeds, and then we're the fourth seed. So we play Texas, Utah plays San Diego, and the winners play on Saturday. Our rematch against Texas, the final score was 34-7. It's almost identical to the first game. The only points we scored was a pick six by Charlie, one of our cornerbacks. So we didn't score on offense, but we did score a defensive touchdown, which I guess, I mean, it's better than nothing. But yeah. So talked on the Gridiron Beauties podcast last night, and you know, it's my team, so I want to be careful about what I say. I love the Denver Bandits, and I I always want us to do well, but to beat a team like Texas Elite Spartans, you have to do a lot of things the right way. You have to coach your ass off, you have to play your ass off, and you have to execute. We didn't do all those things. I think we played our asses off, but executing, and we just didn't do all the things required to beat Texas, and that's unfortunate. Um, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. All that stuff, like what we did or did not do, added up to a score of 34-7 and the end of our season. So it's unfortunate. We headed back to Denver on Friday, and our season's over. The good news is Mississippi is the only team, in my opinion, that can match up with Texas, and they are in the championship versus Texas. So I'll actually be going to that. I haven't went to the WNFC championship weekend last couple of years, but I've decided to go this year because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to see some people and um, watch that game in person. To be honest with you, I think it's going to be a great game, and so I will be heading to Texas for the championship weekend next weekend. And so that's the update with the Bandits. That's the whole season. Um, the shortened version, obviously. There's a lot of things that happened in between there that I didn't talk about. We lost Kelly Washington for the year in week one. Grace Cooper was out for half the year. Obviously, we lost our right tackle for the year. Desmond Thomas um, quit the team like about mid-season, as did Jamie Brand. Um, so, you know, it is what it is. Uh, for this season, the season's over. We have to move on and learn from it. But this offseason would be very interesting. And not to be interesting for the Denver Bandits because we're going to have a new head coach, but also to be interesting for all the teams. Based on what I've heard in the rumor mill, there's some turmoil with certain teams that could cause um, some division and maybe some players not coming back. And so I would be worried about that if I was the league because these are the teams that I'm talking about are a lot of playoff teams. And so if these playoff teams fall apart and they're not as competitive in the future, you're essentially going to have like three or four really good teams instead of, eight or nine, which obviously isn't what OJ in the league wants. So hopefully that's not true. Hopefully it's just like rumors and one one disgruntled player and not half the team. You know what I mean? Like you want to think more optimistically, but you have to also be realistic about the possibility that there are some serious problems with some of the teams. So we'll see how that plays out. Moving on to the Vipers before we get into the interview. The Vipers are a semi-pro men's team here in Colorado that I help coach, and our record is now 4-2. So we lost our first game to the Chargers. Um, we lost to the Phoenix, who are the only undefeated team. by one score. We actually lost both of our games, but both of our games, both of our losses are by one score. And then we've obviously won four. So I've been in town for most of the games. I think I missed one game so far because I was out of town for the Bandits. Vipers are a really good team, lots of talent. Um, Justin's one, Justin is the best semi-pro football coach in Colorado, in my opinion, um, which is a huge compliment. But I really do feel that way. And so the fact that they have Justin is a huge advantage. Um, the Vipers have a lot of talent, obviously well coached. The only thing that's really stopping them from being the most dominant team in Colorado for the foreseeable future is themselves. So whenever the Vipers lose, they basically beat themselves. And so the question is, can the Vipers not beat the Vipers again this season? Um, and I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, I'm hoping the best, and I'm all in now that the Bandits are done. I'm full time with the Vipers, but I don't know, man. It's well, semi-pro men's football. It's different from women's. Men's, you just have like a lot of nonsense, a lot of egos and guys that aren't team players, and tear their teammates down and all this stuff. It's just not easy to deal with. So, me and Coach Justin are trying to figure that out and see if we can, make this thing work and finish out the season strong and reach our potential. But the players really have to meet us halfway when it comes to the standard and what we expect from them. And hopefully they rise to the occasion. So, without further ado, my interview this month is with Quincy Davis of the St. Louis Slam. I've been told by reliable sources that he is not a guy that does interviews, and so I feel special that he obliged. But without further ado, here's the interview. Hopefully, you enjoyed as much as I did. All right, I'd like to welcome Coach Quincy Davis, TL Talks podcast. Coach, it's been a while since I've seen you in person, but I've been admiring you from afar. So thank you for joining me, first of all.
Sure.
Yeah, no worries, man. So, as I told you, I want to start with your personal life. So, I don't know much about you, Quincy. I've had either the pleasure or the reverse of pleasure of coaching against you in the past, and so that wasn't enjoyable for us. But it was a challenge. I enjoy a challenge. So, but I don't know much about you personally. All I know is you're a really good football coach. So, outside of that, I ascertain that you're a really big family man, but I don't know much else. And so, what are you willing to share with the podcast about your personal life and background?
Yeah. See, I am a husband, a father. Got two biological, one bonus. So my bonus, me and my stepson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to think I'm a family man. Family's pretty big to me. Me and my siblings, we get together every Sunday. Our families get together, have dinner. So kind of that old school, Sunday dinner, and we'll either have it at my sisters or my mom's or something like that. But yeah, pretty close knit family. Family's a big deal. It's a priority for me, and totally understand it from a coaching perspective when our players have family things that they have to attend to.
Mhm.
But yeah, probably that's probably a good makeup of who I am. I understand that football is a it's a contact slash collision sport.
Yeah.
But I think every successful coach, they also have to recognize the individual is the individual as well. So I get them for a couple hours a week, but they leave practice and they go do everything else that they're doing. Work, kids, husbands, girlfriends, whatever their situation is. So got to make sure you're when it's important to them. It's important to them. And for me, yeah, my family is definitely important. Um, as far as who I am, though, my what makes me up. Yeah, I've been coaching football. I've been coaching football since my the first summer that I graduated from college.
Okay.
So I graduated college in 2002, and I was back at my high school coaching like that fall. And I grew up in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis, born and raised.
Okay.
If I've ever left here, it's been for traveling purposes or anything like that. I've never lived permanently in another city.
Uh,
I like to travel, but yeah, St. Louis is home, right now anyway.
mhm.
Has been for all my life. And that's kind of where my family is too. Um, Went to high school here, played running back and corner in high school. Then I went on collegiately to play Division III, played corner and kick returner at Washington University, which is also here in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Um, and we were part of the team that I think it was our first that got our first ever playoff bid. My junior year, either my sophomore or junior year, and that was kind of a big deal because Division III, Washington University is kind of an engineering slash liberal arts school. Like it's not really known for football,
Football. Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But those years though, kind of leading up to my initial recruitment, and then the years that I was there,
Mhm.
Washington University football started getting noticed amongst the D3 programs.
Mhm.
So eventually we ended up getting, Mount Union on the schedule. So if you know anything about D3 football, Mount Union's a perennial powerhouse. And, that's kind of a testament to, how WashU football has grown,
Mhm.
since I've been there and then, the year since. But I think it was probably in college where I fell in love with the kind of the X's and O's of the game.
Mhm.
In high school, it was just a lot of, I was fast. I played track. I ran track and played football. Those were kind of my two sports. Dabbled in basketball like freshman and sophomore year, but by the end of my sophomore year, it was like I'm way
Football.
better at track and football than I am at basketball. And then I just, the whole AAU traveling basketball thing, all that kind of stuff. Some guys make it year round if they know that's their sport. And I wasn't convinced basketball was my sport. So I wasn't willing to miss track and football seasons to play basketball.
Makes
So
sense.
yeah, I kind of gave up basketball and just started focusing on track and football. But my junior year was thoroughly enjoying, playing running back and corner. Ended up getting recruited to play corner collegiately, and then they let me do kick return too, just so I could still make sure I was catching the ball and getting some kind of offensive minutes, some
Offensive.
But I think it was probably in college where I fell in love with the coaching part of it. I had a really good coach. Had two really good coaches, secondary coaches, and they were also like the defensive coordinators, both of them.
Mhm.
And it was understanding the coverages, what you can give up, what you're going to take away, what you're going to give up. There's no defense that's going to take everything away, but it was
Right.
understanding, starting to understand, okay, this is what we'll do to stop this. You got to understand this is what this is going to open up. So when that happens, this is kind of our counter punch and that kind of thing. So just learning that from my coaches when I was in college, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, it isn't just about amazing play calling. It's not just about amazing players. There's definitely a X's and O's and being able to think thoroughly through the game plan and understand where you're weak, where you're strong, where they're weak, where they're strong, and trying to have a complete game plan and not just crossing your fingers going into a game. So so yeah, man, that's kind of I've taken that first year that I coached, 2002, like I mentioned, I was back at my high school coaching, and I just like giving back. So my first years coaching, it was at the high school level, me just going back to my alma mater and helping out where I could. Started off just helping with the defensive backs and just trying to share what I had learned collegiately, just drill work and eye discipline and all that kind of stuff. And then over time, doing that for a few years, I ended up learning about the slam. So I actually learned about the slam because the young lady that I was dating at the time, she saw information about a tryout and she went and tried out for the team. I had no idea that we had a team. And she went and tried out, and I didn't offer coaching expertise, experience, or anything like that. I was just kind of hanging back. And so you mentioned Rodney. Rodney was the head coach at the time. And, just watching the tryouts and everything, okay, well, she's not great, but she's not bad, and just kind of that middle of the pack. And she ended up making the team. And so after kind of coming to a few practices, watching her play or practice, watching Rodney and the other staff at the time, just trying to do the drill work, get them to understand what they wanted to get done. After a couple practices, I kind of told Rodney, it's like, hey, if you think you might need some more help, I can help you. I played here, I know about this stuff. I can coach this. I coach at Ladue High School. Blah blah blah. So he ended up letting me on the staff as an assistant coach, and then that's how I got affiliated with the Slam in the first place. A couple of years later, ended up becoming head coach, and yeah, it's kind of taken off from there.
That's where we are. So
Yeah.
we have a couple of things in common. I consider you like 10 times better football coach than me. So I'll kind of work to catch up to you. But you mentioned Mount Union. I actually
Mm-hmm.
went to Heidelberg, which is a D3 school in Ohio. It's in the
Mm-hmm.
same conference as Mount Union. So I'm very familiar with Mount
Yeah.
Union and their dominance. Heidelberg's actually become a pretty good football team since I left. And so we have that in common. We both played D3, and I played quarterback and receiver. You played cornerback and kick returner. So that's cool. So I guess the next question would be, which one should I go for first? I guess Rodney would be a good. We just talked about Rodney. So Rodney's been on my podcast before. I consider him a friend also.
Mm-hmm.
When I started coaching women's football around like 2014ish, and then I coached the Mile High Blaze, as you know, for the first 4 years of their existence. And then the fourth year, the year that they fired me in the off season was the year we played you guys. So that
Mm-hmm.
game was like, I don't know, 42-24 or something like that. It was competitive at halftime. You guys pulled away in the second half, and better team won. Well, me and Rodney had kept in touch, and I always admired you guys as just as an organization, because something I've observed about the Slam is you guys have never had crazy numbers. Um, and there's two teams that come to mind when I think of that: the St. Louis Slam and the Alabama Fire. Both those teams are always good, but they never have crazy numbers. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure why that is, because they always win. So you would think that would naturally bring in players. So I'm
Right.
not sure if it's a
You,
geography thing
you
or what's going on, but
you'd think that would be the case, but yeah.
yeah, you would think. But those two teams come to mind when it comes to numbers, with basically like you guys having less but doing more with less, which is very admirable. But my point is that from afar, looking from the outside, St. Louis Slam looked like a well-oiled machine with Rodney calling the offense, you calling the defense. It was like you guys were playing chess and other teams were playing checkers. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like I would see Rodney out there with his hand signals and stuff, and he would have everybody on the line, have them look at him. He'd see the defense, who's in the box, make the
yep.
signal, and then we're off and running. So I guess what I want, one of my first questions for you would be about Rodney. Um,
Yeah.
he, you and him were kind of like the two heads of the team. I've heard from reliable source that you were kind of the heartbeat of the Slam. And
Mm,
so when Rodney left, um, it bummed me out, because I'm like, well, the Slam has become this really, really good team with the leadership of Rodney and Quincy. How does that look without one of those? Like,
sure.
especially calling the offense is not easy. So, how's that going to
Sure.
be? Well, the way it went for me was they released the schedules for the WFA this one season, and it said on the schedule Boston Renegades versus St. Louis Slam, and I was like, oh shit. So I said, okay, well, this is what I've been waiting for, right? Because St. Louis Slam have been good for so long. They've been playing at a pro level, but they've been in D2. And
Mm,
so I want to see them play Boston, because if anybody can give Boston a run, it's a team like St. Louis, in my opinion. So I could
yeah.
not wait. I was like, man, if I could fly to that game, I'll fly to St. Louis if I have to. Like I'm a true fan of the sport. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in my history, I've like went out of my way to watch these top teams play each other. So as you know, that season never happened because of COVID, unfortunately. So then, Rodney was going to coach that season. Then when the season
Mm,
didn't happen, he ended up stepping away the season after that, which was
yeah.
last season. So he did that, and then of course I had like some concern, just wondering how they would look without him. So what I said on the podcast the Gridiron Beauties podcast with Oscar. I said they were talking about all the teams and the slam and stuff, and I said, well, Slam are a very good team. They still have a lot of the same athletes. They do great job with retention. I know Quincy's a really good coach. I know Rodney's a really good coach, but I've only seen them together. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Batman and Robin. So
Yeah.
how do they look without one of those guys? My concern is that they won't look the same, and maybe they have less chemistry on offense because Rodney's been, the guy forever.
Sure.
And so at the beginning of last season, that's kind of how it looked, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
looked like you were kind of figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
This is from a distance, but like you didn't look as dominant as you were in the past, and you weren't scoring as many points. But then about maybe a few games in, or about halfway in the season, it started clicking.
Mm-hmm.
And you started being the same of old, and having the same scores and the dominance and stuff. So I felt salty that like I knew you guys were playoff worthy last year, but because of Massey, you didn't get in because of how
Yeah.
the season started. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
But that from the outside, that's my perspective. So I guess my first question for you is, how fair is that perspective, since you actually know the inside scoop,
Yeah.
um, to like what reality was versus what I saw?
Yeah. No, I think your assessment was pretty accurate. You know, I Yeah, we won a couple of championships with me as the head coach. Me doing the defense, Rodney doing the offense, and it worked. Yeah, I was watching one of your podcasts, and you mentioned one season or one game you had to do offense, defense, and special teams.
Yeah.
All just yourself, right?
Yep.
Luckily, I've never had to be the only coach at a particular game. But I do know exactly what you described. One of the seasons that we played before Rodney started helping us full time again.
Mhm.
Um, that was the case. I was calling offense, defense, and special teams. I had two assistant coaches, but they were first year coaches. They were rookie
Yeah.
coaches, so they were new to the organization, new to the players, new to the dynamics, all that stuff. So they were kind of finding their way as well.
Mhm.
And you're right, that just it's if you can get away with not doing it, like yeah, you prefer someone else that has some responsibility. So even just in between series, like if you've got to make adjustments with players, you got the time to do that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it always, in my opinion, it always worked better. When if Rodney was there, I had somebody else that could do while there were other things to do.
Yeah.
But no hard feelings with Rodney at all. It's one of the things that I've seen over the years, just as a head coach. Every year I always tell our players, I'm not gonna beg you to play. Like you're gonna be here because you want to be here. Just because I know what I demand of them from a time and commitment perspective. And the same thing with the coaching staff. And I appreciate Rodney. One, even just for bringing me on as an assistant coach. Way back when, but
Yeah.
also just for the time and effort and hours and commitment that he offered the organization. When he wanted to be around. Um,
Mhm.
and I think everybody left on good terms. We kind of met up at a mutual spot. He and the players and everything. So it wasn't like he just ghosted us or anything like that.
Yeah.
He kind of let everybody know what was going on. His daughter was born. She was getting older. She was about to start getting into sports. And just the time commitments and everything else. He's like, if I'm honest, I love football, but I don't know that I want to spend as many hours as I've been doing it now that she's starting to play sports, which
Mhm.
I 100% totally respect. I'm
Yeah.
kind of getting to that point now with my 5-year-old and 3-year-old. They're getting older. They're going to start playing sports here pretty soon. I'm going to have to make a decision about how much time I'm going to continue to commit to the slam and the high school boys that I coach. But yeah, it definitely was easier, I think, when the two of us had it and we were kind of splitting thoughts each week about what we liked, what we didn't like, and just watching the film, breaking down. Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? That kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, when he stepped away, it was back on me at that point to kind of make sure the defense stayed, dominant, functional, making sure we're doing what we're doing, but then also making sure we didn't miss a beat as far as the offense was concerned. wasn't as big of a leap as you might expect because even with the offense when Rodney was calling it, I was still a part of it. It was absolutely, scheme wise, plays that he liked and what he wanted to do. Absolutely, he's making all those play calls. I wasn't vetoing anything or anything like that. Like it was his ship. But when it came to the teaching of it, the run game stuff, I was we did that together. Most of the time I'm the offensive line coach. So the pass protections, the run game stuff, what we're looking at, what we think we like, all that stuff. Like I'm watching the film and I already know like this stuff will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Or teaching, our players, this is how you block this, or this is what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So, when it came to that transition, it wasn't completely like, oh no, I've got to do it. It was more, okay, this is another thing that I have to do now. So it became, instead of me just game planning for the defense and knowing Rodney was going to take care of the offense, now it was back to, like you said, I've got to do offense, defense, and special teams. We got to have a plan for all of it and make sure I'm not missing something. And from that perspective, it was definitely harder, and that's definitely one of the areas Rodney's missed. Just being able to have another brain who I know he's going to take that ownership. He's going to put the same amount of time watching that film and trying to come up with his own thoughts and game plans for what he thinks is going to work.
Yeah.
So I don't have to. But yeah, the leading into that last season. So we had
Yeah.
the COVID year
Yep.
where everything got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
The following season, so that was 2021. So the following season, the WFA did launch, or they did have a season. But personally, I was looking at our numbers, just coming off that COVID
Oh yeah,
season.
you guys took a year off because.
Yeah, and just looking at our numbers, I personally made the decision that we were going to sit out.
Mm-hmm.
We had enough skill people. We didn't have the bigs. So we
Right.
didn't have enough bigs where I felt like we could get to and through the season and didn't want to get midway through a season and then forfeit. We had a lot of players who were still very near to the at risk population, for COVID, infections. So a lot of people still taking care of grandparents or seeing them daily or something like that who flat out express some concerns with,
Yeah.
playing football and being able to commit to it. And so yeah, it was just kind of me taking a look at it, saying, could we grind this season out and make it happen? Sure. Is that the right answer for everybody?
Yeah.
And that was kind of me saying no. Like my rule number 1, 2, and 3 for the players is do what's best for the team. And for me as a coach at that time, looking at the numbers for the group that was willing to commit and do it, I didn't think that was the right answer for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of me just keeping us out that year. So in that time, the veteran players, they kind of continued to work out. Some of them went and played for other teams just because they just had that football itch, But last year, that 2022 season, that was our year back, playing for the
Yeah.
WFA.
Yeah. That's right.
So when you talk about the beginning of that season, so it's not just, that Rodney's not there anymore. It's also, it's been 2 years since we played as a
Yeah.
unit, you know?
Yeah. That's a
So
good point.
yeah, so look, those first 3 games, and it wasn't even like it was never that the team felt, outmatched or outcoached or anything like that. Like you go watch the film, it's you've coached long enough. It's first down looks good, second down looks good, third down, somebody false starts, or somebody there's a holding penalty. Or you
Yeah.
start the next
Something
drive and
inflicted.
instead of 1st and 10, you get a penalty on first down. Now it's 1st and 20. It's like those little
Yeah.
things, just you just being out of practice.
Right.
And so yeah, it's frustrating as a coach because it's like, guys, this is a little shit, like like fix it, but it's also there's no substitute for playing. So those 2 years out, they definitely had an impact just from a consistency perspective. So yeah, those first couple games there, we struggled with just the little things and getting getting lined up right. Even some of the formation stuff. Some of the formations that I use were a little bit different than Rodney's, at least like terminology perspective. So it was the team getting used to how I called the offense versus how Rodney called the offense.
Yeah. Of course.
But yeah, like you said, it took a couple games, but by that second half of the season, like we were
Back to
looking pretty
normal.
decent. It gave Boston a run for their money. That through that first half of that game. But the pace that Boston operates at, and I think we only had like 25 or 30 maybe at the most on our roster at that point. And just how fast they operate, yeah, we just got gassed, and second half, we just didn't have the stamina to keep
Mhm.
up. But, through that first half though, it was a great game. We were leading at halftime, and, as far as I can remember, like nobody's been leading on Boston at halftime, in years,
Yeah.
so yeah, it helped. It helped to have that kind of clicking as the season went on, and in the belief that, hey, we haven't fallen off. It's just been a few games to get our sea legs back again, but like we're still here. We still got it. We still can do what we do. Like slam football is still slam football. It just took us a few games to get back to where we needed to be.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I apologize because I completely forgot. Like now I remember, but I forgot that you guys had taken a year off after the COVID. It's
Yeah,
like you said, it gives you 2 years of not playing or coaching
yeah,
the slam. And so naturally, with Rodney not being there and having 2 years off, it might not have had anything to do with Rodney. It might have just been the St. Louis Slam are going to look like that regardless. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
two
yeah.
years off. So very valid point. Which brings me on my next question. So I wanted to ask you your 2 cents on practices. The reason I'm asking you is
Hmm.
because I'm pretty well connected in women's football. I know a lot of coaches and owners and stuff, and I'm always picking people's brains. I have this podcast to learn myself, but there's a WNFC team that, and I'm not going to say who it is, but they've had a very good season, and they haven't practiced in person
Hmm.
since week 2,
Nice.
and now the only game left is a championship, right?
Right.
They haven't practiced in person since week 2,
Hmm.
and they've had a really good season.
Yeah,
So my question for you, Quincy, is that kind of blew my mind for obvious reasons,
yeah.
but it makes me like I'm always open to evolving and thinking differently, right? So I'm
Hmm.
thinking, okay, well, how much how much does a women's football team need to practice? Like
Hmm.
how much of is it mental versus physical? I think a common mistake in women's football is that coaches will coach women like they're men and practice too much or hit too much, and like women's bodies will break down and you'll be more injured than you need to be.
Yeah,
So that team is an example of a team that didn't practice in person. All they did was Zooms, and it was partly because of their chemistry. They have or their team makeup. Like they have a lot of out of state players, so they couldn't be
yeah.
there, and
I
so
figured.
that definitely it has something to do with it. But the point is that they were able to do that and still win, right? So my question for you is like, do you think how much you practice is like case by case? Do you think that there's like a right answer? Do you think it's based on the team, like what the team can handle, or like what would be your middle ground? Because I've always practiced 3 times a week. They
Yeah.
practice none at all, but I've had good results and they've had good results. And so, do you think there's a middle ground, or what would be your answer?
Uh, so
That's a loaded question.
yeah, I mean, nah, that's cool. Like and I know I'm well aware that other teams do it. We've just never had out of town players for St. Louis, and call it, maybe we don't have the pockets to do that. Maybe we don't have the correct makeup or sponsors or financial resources to incentivize people to come from out of town to play for us. Um, just me being an old football coach, I would say if you're not going to practice in person, and you better have some dudes on your team. Your recruiting should be just amazing. Where you guys can sit on the field and you're just better than everybody.
Yeah,
I'm from that school of hard work pays off. So there's no substitution for hard work. That's not to say that the out of town players aren't working hard. Where they are, but there's also something to be said about team chemistry. There's something to be said about you as an offensive tackle knowing exactly what your offensive guard is going to do when this play is called. If your job is to protect the quarterback or to move this person for the running back. I just think that's hard to do if You're not able to build that chemistry over time. I think it's hard to build that team camaraderie, that team uh, dynamic,
Yeah.
doing it just not in person.
Mhm.
One of the greatest things about the game to me is just those hard workouts, those those trying scenarios where you come out on top, or even the ones where you fall short,
Mhm.
but it's collectively felt, and yeah, you have the games for that, but you can generate that as a coach. You can generate that in practice too, to start to create that gelling, as a unit, as a team, as a, whether it's a defensive unit or offensive unit, whatever it is. Your practices are your opportunities to build that, So personally, yeah, I'm not real big on recruiting out of town. I feel like the talent that I have that year that we can scrape up here in St. Louis, we'll coach that up, and we'll see what it looks like. We wouldn't necessarily reject an outside person that wants to be a part of it. But we actually had a young lady last year.
Mhm.
She wanted to come play for us. She lived a couple of hours away. I kind of level set with her early on. I was like, that's fine. We practice on these days. Can you at least make one of these days a week? Because I'll tell you, like, if you can't practice at all, like, all we're doing is just talking like this. You're not going to show up on game day and convince me that you're better than anybody that I've been coaching the last 3 months,
Right.
and she understood that. She respected that. She was able to make a couple of practices, and she joined us, and she was actually with us for one of those games, and she saw that, as good as she wasn't better than the people that we had been grooming here in St. Louis. So it was kind of a decision for her. Do I, commit to driving these X amount of hours to be in St. Louis and only make one practice a week, and everybody else is getting these 2 or 3 practices a week? And she respectfully, she said, you know what, coach, I don't think I'll be able to do this. It's too hard to get here, and for me to not like be the guy, for me to have to still split playing time with somebody else.
Yeah.
I 100% understand, and I'm okay with it. So if
Right.
your situation changes, let me know. But that's kind of where we left it. And I still feel like that's amenable. It's a good relationship. I could probably reach out to her. I could call her. She'd pick up the phone. We could have a conversation. But I made sure I was kind of upfront with her. It's just not my personal coaching style. And we don't have, like I said, we don't have the financial impact or the incentives to say, hey, come here. Like, if you want to come here and you can kind of make it work and you're willing to kind of fit into what we're doing, absolutely, you're welcome. We can absolutely have that conversation. But I firmly believe that practice, building that team identity together, even if the rookies that we've had, or some of them have been busting their butts since January, and they still only get time when we're up. They're not playing start from day one, and all that stuff matters, because that player that's not playing a lot right now, she's still learning. She's still growing. She's still getting stronger. She's getting faster. She's understanding the system. So, season two, like, she could look completely, and that's what happens with a lot of rookies. Their second season playing looks completely night and day different. Like, they understand the game now. They understand what's going on. And for me, that to me is part of the reason we've been successful over the years, and not just like a one trick pony,
Because of
because we
retention.
do try to coach everybody as best we can for those that show up. So even if you're not the guy or you're not the woman, that first year, you've grown. By the time you get to your second year, now you can compete for that spot.
Mhm.
That third year, now you are the person, and you're helping bring along another rookie, as opposed to just, shopping around for, who the latest and greatest free agent is that year.
Mm. Yeah, that makes me, when you talk about that, it makes me think of Alyssa Speckles, because she
Yeah.
played for Denver last season, and she
Mm-hmm.
was a former Slam player, and he had become, in a very short amount of time, one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah.
Like, he
Yeah.
just, you know what I'm saying? She's dedicated, has good hands, and she has natural size, and so
Mm-hmm.
it made me think of that when you just said that.
No,
so
hey,
I
now,
so I appreciate
now,
you coaching her up
yeah, exactly, right. As I was going to
and
say. Now
cultivating.
you go watch the film of her first season. No, you that
Yeah.
she is not nearly the player that she was for you guys, just
Yeah.
recently, and obviously that's part of us. That's part of what you guys did to her. But that's kind of why, to me, there's just no substitute for practice. The understanding of football just generally, she got with us that first year. By the
Mhm.
time she was rolling around that second year, like she understood the game. Now it was kind of fine tuning the skills, getting her on her working on her releases, her hand placement
Yeah,
for catching the ball, like all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And she's a fast learner. You coach, so it's but yeah, you I think you miss out on those opportunities if you aren't coaching them as a group. If you're not getting together practicing on a regular basis, I think you just miss out on some of that stuff.
So before we change subjects, let me give you some insight on how my team does it, the Denver Bandits,
Hmm.
and I'll be curious to see if you're like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, and that could work in theory, or
Yeah.
like if you just say, stick with what you think. So
Yeah.
what Denver Bandits say is, we have probably, let's say, about a dozen international players. So those are players that come from other countries, live here
Hmm.
during the season. They're at every practice. It's no, they're full time, so there's no issue, right? They're just from
Cool.
another country.
Hmm.
Um, that's not even worth talking about because it's obviously best case scenario. Now, out of state players is where the debate starts. So what we do for our out of state players is we say you need to come be at practice like 3 or 4 weekends before the first game, because
Hmm.
we know like if you live in Vegas, you flying to Denver, doing that every weekend, it's just not financially feasible.
Sure.
So we say you need to be at practice 1 month per week or one weekend per month to be there in person with your teammates. Then in the meantime, every time we have a practice, we have a team page, where like our in-state players are on there, our out-of-state players are on there. So the out-of-state players will post their workout videos of them
Hmm.
working out while we're practicing. So we
Cool.
not we know they're not just sitting on a couch eating chips while we're
Yeah.
putting in practice time. So
Yeah.
that's helpful. And the last piece, which is obviously equally important, is that they stay in their playbooks. They know the plays and know what to do when they do show up in person,
Sure.
which that plays itself out. Because if you haven't been studying, you're going to look like an idiot and
Yep.
you're not going to play.
Yep.
So that's what we do. So now that I've told you that, would you say that that is like workable, or would you still say there's no substitute for being there full time and making?
Um, well, I think that's workable. So, and if I said I want to make sure I don't misquote myself. If I said there's no substitute for I feel like I said there's no substitute for hard work. Not
Yeah,
there's no substitute for you being at practice.
yeah.
Because we even have that situation here, like in town.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned, just family is a big deal to some folks. While we may practice 3 times a week, somebody has something that they're not going to make 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
My kids got a recital, or my kids got a game, or just something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I ask of the team is, okay, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to call me and tell me you can't make Wednesday's practice, then what are you doing in light of that? Okay, coach, I'm not going to make Wednesday's practice, but I'm going to get together with Jamie on Monday and Tuesday. We're going to get some routes in. We're going to get something done. Like, well,
Yeah.
like, okay, that's an easier conversation, So
Right.
I'm fully aware that, while I set the standard of, be at all the practices, less than 50% are at all the
Right.
practices throughout the season,
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think what you described, it has the basic premises there. So while you are practicing, you said you got that link up where you can see, okay, they are actually doing something. They are not just sitting on the couch. They're
Yeah.
not just, well, I know they got practice, but I'm gonna sit here and watch, America's
Netflix.
Next Top Model,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're actually getting some work done. And then you guys have the playbook and everything. So when they do come in town prior to that game, you're calling out plays or whatever. You're not explaining,
Yes.
well, this is what this play is. That you're
Right.
not doing an install with them. They should
Yes.
already know the install and they are going. So so that mental kind of practice, that stuff works for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I don't know the ins and outs for some teams. I know some teams do. They just want the athlete, and they're just like, if you just get here, like we'll just figure it out. And then that
Yeah, we
person
don't
may
do
or
that.
may not commit to that, and then you're just hoping that they're just this amazing athlete and they can make the difference for you. And I think that's a losing recipe. But
Yeah.
what you just described, if that's more along the lines of how folks are handling those those out of town people. Yeah, that makes more sense. Like, because it's
Mm,
while it's not an in-person practice, it's still a practice.
mm.
They're still working the same time you are. They're still learning the same stuff you are. That install is still happening. So when you
Yeah,
guys do get together, like, you can actually
it's
shortcut
seamless.
a lot of the conversations, and you're not having to slow down, reteach because she wasn't here the last 2 months. Now we got
Right,
to wait for her to get caught up with everybody else.
right,
Yeah.
precisely.
Yep.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is, I'm not saying that what we do is right or what you do is right. I think I'm open to any possibilities, but the beauty of the way we do it is, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you take care of yourself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like whether you're removed from the team or you don't play in the game because you don't know what you're doing, like it all takes care of itself. And we don't
Yep.
really care about hurt feelings or if you quit. Like, you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? We have good enough numbers that we're not begging people to play for us. And
Right.
um so that's a good place to be. I mean, when I was with the Blaze, we never had good enough numbers where we could even go 11v11 in practice. So with
Mm-hmm.
Denver Bandits, we do have that. And I never had that as a coach my entire career. So I'm like, well, shit, man. Like now, like it's like one of those things you don't know how good it is until you have it. Now that we have 11v11, you can realistically plan to play a team like the Utah Falcons that run the triple option,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
you can draw up a scout offense, run against your
Yep.
defense, and then now
It
you're
makes
at
a
a
difference.
whole different level of like competing with a Boston or a Texas or a Utah.
Sure.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
I just didn't have that forever. And so,
Yeah.
cheers to teams that do have it because it's not like that isn't the majority of women's football,
Right.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
just the
just,
current reality.
just coaching the high school boys, like you mentioned it, just even from a scout team perspective, it's huge. It's huge to be able to try to simulate, even if it's not at the same speed that it will be game
Yeah.
day. Just getting them used to seeing this and being able to recognize it on game day. That
Tennessee. Yeah.
that's the difference between a first down and a touchdown. That's
Seriously.
seriously. So yeah, scout team players are huge. That's just another proponent for why I believe in person practices just can't be replaced.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And if it would be a different conversation if like we had so many out of state players that we didn't have 30 some at practice where you can go
Mhm.
11v11. But since we do, it's not as
Yeah,
big of an issue. But if we had too many out of state players, the
yeah,
numbers wouldn't.
it would be weird.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Yep.
So there's a
Yeah.
balance there. A few more questions before I let you go. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about, let's see, where do we go? Play calling and coaching styles. So
Mhm.
something I've noticed about the best women's teams in the nation is most of them coach a certain way, specifically on offense. So they
Mhm.
do it like Rodney used to do it. Like the team will line up. It's no huddle, but not no huddle. It's like it's tempo offense. So you're
Yeah.
on the line. You look at the coach. The coach sees the defense, gives you a symbol or whatever, and then you go and you run the play. But in my opinion, that's the highest level of play calling in our sport.
Mhm.
Um, Texas does it, Mississippi does it, Boston does it.
Mhm.
You guys probably do it. Like Chicago used to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Roddy did it. So like
Yep.
when you think of all these top teams, there's a common thread, right?
Yeah.
And so, what would you say about that? Like, do you think would you agree that that is the most efficient way to call offense, or like how would
I
you
think
compare?
so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
Um, well, shit. Like, oh, sorry. I don't know if I can say
No, you're good.
that.
Yeah, you can say whatever.
You ever play Madden?
Yeah, of course.
When do you know you made a bad play call in Madden?
When I made a bad play call,
hmm you go through, you pick your formation, you pick your play. When do you know you don't like that play?
oh, when you come out and the defense is
Once they
designed to
get
stop
lined
it.
up.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
that's when you know you don't like the play call anymore. You don't
That's a
wait
good
till after
point.
the ball is snapped. Like, you call your play, they get lined up, and you're like, I don't like that anymore, and then you start audibling.
Right,
So it's
right, right.
kind of the same deal. Instead of some teams they will do that. Like, I know Chicago. Now obviously, he was a machine, so it was a little different. But there are absolutely times where you could tell he had a play call, they lined up, but it was kind of a check. So they called it, they lined up, they got there, they got set, then they did a false cadence, they stood up and they looked, and he just kind of gave a head nod, like, yeah, go ahead and run it, and then they turn around and snap the ball.
Yeah.
Um, Other teams, they'll just give you the formation and then they're trying to call their play based on how they think you're going to line up. Boston operates at such a fast pace from what I remember. They're not even looking at the defense. Like a lot of times they're just like, we're going to dictate how fast we go and you guys got to catch up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's something to be said about offenses being able to kind of keep the defense on their heels by being in that attack mode without huddling every play. That
Mm,
huddling kind of gives the defense a chance to regroup.
mm.
Um,
Your
you know, the offense
substitutions.
the offense gets to huddle, defense gets to huddle, defense can be in there. They can kind of be hyping themselves up, let's make sure we shut them down. Let's get it done, blah, 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 blah. But if you never
Yeah.
really give them a chance to do that, like if you rip off a 15-yard run and you get like right back on the ball, like nobody's high fiving, nobody's trying to re up everybody. Like
Yeah.
you just got a first down run on you. The referee's placing the ball down. Now the offense is moving. Like there's no communication on the defense as far as like morale building. It's like strong left, like hurry up and get lined up. Like it's more chaos than it is, defense get ready to pin your ears back and make the play now.
Mm.
So yeah, I personally think there's something to be said about offenses that can operate from a no huddle perspective and just adds a different dynamic to the defense that I don't think you get when you huddle after every play.
What I know, and I totally agree. I just want to make sure you agree with me.
Yeah.
But when I was watching Boston, I haven't watched that much WFA because I've been enveloped with WNFC, but I've watched Boston this season, and something I noticed was they're one of the running back, big girl. There's a bigger back and a small fast
Mm-hmm.
back. I think her name's Kusanen. So Kusanen had this run. It was like a zone left run, and she ran over like three or four players, like just
Mm-hmm.
battering ram, like all
Yep.
star, right? Amazing run, almost scored a touchdown, got tackled inside the 5. And like she got tackled finally, put the ball down and jogged back to where she was the next play. And they ran the next play in for a touchdown. Like there was no high fives, there was no celebration,
Nope.
there was no let's fucking go. It was like
Right.
like literally no celebration at all. And
Yeah.
so you ask yourself, how many women's teams wouldn't celebrate that? I mean,
Yeah.
like realistically,
Yeah.
maybe a handful. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's like another level of discipline where you're not ever celebrating yourself. And
Right.
so
Yeah, it comes from the top down. I think I mean, coaching's hard to begin with, but
yeah,
then coaching women's football, you know, you may or may not have the athletes that you want. So when you do get it moving in the right direction, there's that pause for yay, they finally did it, and kind of give them that moment to celebrate. Or if you're an organization like Boston, where excellence is the norm, it's like no, we don't celebrate after runs like that. We turn around, get lined up, and we snap the fucking ball.
yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a different level of intensity for that matured organization.
Preach. Next thing I want to ask you about is coaching styles. So I was
Mm-hmm.
actually going to make a Facebook post about this sometime soon, but I've had kind of an inner dialogue with myself about different coaching styles. Like, I coach with guys that are like authoritarian and everything is my way or the highway, the dictatorship, and they're very loud and, demanding, kind
Yep.
of like Kaneki was. But then there's coaches like me that are more laid back and I don't really raise my voice much.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a very high standard and I know how to communicate, but I, it's not my natural personality to
Yep.
like yell or like berate somebody. So my question for you is, since there is different coaching styles, would you say that they can be equally effective, or how would you answer that question specifically for women's football?
Yeah, I think they can be equally effective for sure.
Okay.
Um, I think you will find that more women will respond to the coach who can calmly explain what they want to happen
Yeah,
and then
I,
use
I
the
agree.
authoritative angry voice as a counterpunch when needed, as
Yeah,
opposed to living in that authoritarian voice all the
right.
time. You know,
Yeah, that's a
because
great
a lot of
answer.
times it's not that they won't do what you said. A lot of times they don't understand what you wanted. So
Yes.
being able to explain that and like, oh, okay, I get it, and like you don't have to raise your voice. So by the time you do raise your voice, they're like, okay, yeah, I am fucking up. I need to fix it. And they kind of understand that it's not just yelling all the time.
Yeah. After a certain amount of time, it kind of sounds like the wah 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 like
Yeah, yeah,
from the
or they
players.
even start to take it personal, right? Like
Yeah.
he's just always yelling at me. I must not be good, and and that's usually not the case. It's you're just not doing it the way I want you to do it. I just need you to fix this.
Good point. So I wanted to, and this is kind of a juicy question, but I wanted to
Okay.
hear your 2 cents on Tammy Moore and Jelani because they play for Texas.
Yep.
I can't help but ask about that because they were obviously two very good players that went to play for Texas. And I
Mhm.
also wanted to hear your thoughts on Texas in general and the WNFC, just from your perspective. So one of my last questions.
So Tammy and Jelani, I love them.
So do I.
They're good people.
Mhm.
They're good athletes. They're good football players. And if you ask them, they'll say the same thing about us here back home. I don't think they didn't leave for managerial reasons or anything like that. Both of them, just where they were in life at that point, they were looking for something just outside of St. Louis, something a little bit more, something along their career lines. And um, between OJ and some of the other people in Texas, it was kind of well, we have this, and you'll still have the opportunity to play for a good football team.
Ah,
And so, hated to lose them for sure.
mhm.
But every time they're back in town, they're hitting me up, asking how they can help, if there's anything they can do. When our games are streamed, they'll comment on the games. They're still watching, slam football and coaching their old teammates and all, or
Yeah.
cheering for their old teammates rather. So yeah, absolutely love them. Have no hard feelings about them. I'm glad they've continued to find success outside of what we were able to kind of birth them with just their inaugural seasons of football. And I'm glad they've continued to play at a high level. Both of them were great players for us. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about them.
Yeah,
I
nothing but
I
positive.
absolutely love them.
Yeah.
Texas, they're they're a dominant football team, always have been. I don't know. Since we don't have to play them, like I don't look at everything that they do. I'll occasionally dial in to see how Jelani and Tammy are doing. But just perennially, as far as I can remember, Dallas has been the team to beat in that WNFC league. So they've been kicking butt and taking names and been doing it well for years. Um, and I know we played them, the Dallas team. I want to say it was either the season before or 2 seasons before the WNFC got started. And I know we had to go to Dallas for that playoff game, and we ended up losing. It was one of the years our roster size was small, but OJ was on that team. I want to say that was maybe either the last year or second to last year that OJ played as running back for that Dallas elite team.
Yeah.
But yeah, just looking at them when we played them, had a lot of athletes on that team. They were obviously well coached, but they just had a lot of depth, a lot of good depth. It wasn't like first team's great, second team like second team was also great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just and
Most
that's
teams
kind of
can't
the
do that.
formula. If you can assemble a team like that, like that is kind of the name of the game. Like we'll put our 11 out there and we'll see how they fare against your 11. And if somebody gets a bruise, how does that second person coming in, how do they look? And if they're just as good as the first team, then you got depth issues. For us, we didn't have the depth to keep up. So we made a couple plays here and there, but just over the course of 4 quarters, yeah, we didn't have enough to hang. So looks like they're still, if they still got the formula, they're still churning out, good athletes in that Texas area, but then also grabbing a couple of athletes from other areas. So at the end of the day, they put those 11 on the field, and then they rotate, and they still got 11 killers on the field. And it's like, where do you, how do you combat that? How do you kind of match numbers and speed and agility and strength? If you don't have the matchups. But yeah, right now it looks like Dallas is still continuing their winning formula there.
What is your opinion of the WNFC?
Um, so I respect it for sure. OJ has a couple years ago, I think. It was definitely a couple years ago. I want to say it was before. Yeah, it was before we won our last championship. So I guess when she was getting the league started, she had talked to us about potentially joining the WNFC. And obviously things are a little bit different than they were then. With the success the league has been afforded and some of the additional partnerships and everything that they've been able to work out.
Mm.
But absolutely respect the league for what it is. It's always been it's been kind of um, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's always been projected or presented as, high quality, top tier, women's football. And, for what I've seen, looking at the games, like that's kind of what it presents to be. There's good play calling, good athletes, good coaching. Obviously, it's not boring to watch. You got spin moves, one handed catches. You got all that stuff. So
Yeah.
as a league, absolutely, she's OJ as the person who kind of got it started. She's absolutely delivering on what she said she put out there. She's doing her best to kind of keep women's football in the forefront and try to get additional exposure and trying to get the good teams and the good players in that league to be showcased and all that. So absolutely respect it, for sure.
Do you keep up with women's football in general, or do you just mind your P's and Q's in the
Not
WFA?
not as much as I used to. This
Okay.
5-year-old and this 3-year-old that I have kind of keep me busy.
That's
So
fair.
aside from my day job and then coaching the slam and then these kids, I don't have as much discretionary time as I used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't been keeping up as much as I used to with regards to just all the different women's leagues around the country now.
Gotcha. That's fair. Well, in closing, I'd like to say that this season's been amazing. You guys almost went the whole regular season without giving up a point, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I think you guys are on a collision course with Boston once again. So my last question for you is, when you talked about the last time you played Boston, you guys were up at halftime, and then they beat you in the second half, kind of a war of attrition. So how would you compare that slam versus this slam? Um,
A little
if
older, a
that's
little wiser. Yeah,
okay,
this year we got a few more bodies, so that will help, which is with
yeah,
overall fatigue. They're still going to have more numbers than us. We are, I mean, just we just know it. But I'm hoping that we can kind of continue to maintain our offensive productivity, our defense. Even though we did give up a score this last game, it wasn't the defense that gave up that score.
yeah,
So
or just
if you
pick
let our
six.
defensive people tell us, like, we went the whole regular season without letting anybody score.
Yeah,
So I'm hopeful that, the defense will be able to step up. Um, is it realistic to keep Boston from scoring? I don't think so. I don't.
probably not.
I think they'll
Yeah,
score against most, high school, probably some college teams. I think they're just that good. But our job will be to, do what we can to match up, try to make sure, we know they're going to make some plays. You just got to make sure we make some plays too. Give ourselves a chance to be there in the fourth quarter, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. Just can't get too high, can't get too low, and can't just get run over and fatigued and just have nothing in the tank. That fourth quarter, like that happened last year.
gotcha. Well, fair enough, man. I appreciate your time. I know you got to get out of here. I wanted to say before you leave that I have all the respect in the world for you and the Slam. The fact that you have players like Tammy and Jelani move on to other teams and they have nothing but positive things to say
Yeah,
about you guys speaks to your culture, and that's not common in our sport. A lot of people leave teams and they're not on good terms, and it's not
yeah.
all good, unfortunately. And so I just wanted to congratulate you on cultivating that culture because you've successfully done that, and you are one of the standards of our sport. And so I really
Well, thank
appreciate
you,
your time, man, and
thank you,
let me stay
appreciate
in
it.
touch.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to have this interview. I know we've been trying to do it for a few years now, but yeah,
All
finally found some time to get her done. So yeah, thanks, man.
right, good luck in the playoffs, Q.